everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Christine Morton. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Office of Emergency Management for Springfield, Greene County. Today, I'm speaking with the staff at City Utilities just to talk a little bit about lightning safety. And we have Kara and Warren here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you guys do at City Utilities? Go ahead.
Sure. Good morning, Christine. Yeah, my name is Warren Brooks. I'm the Director of Electric T&D at City Utilities. And what that means is we're responsible for all of the electric system in our community, as well as the tree trimming vegetation management department.
Very cool.
And I'm Kara Schaefer. I'm the Director of Communications and Energy Services. So obviously with communications, a lot of interest whenever there's an outage or anything going on in the community, and how we respond to that and making sure that we get the information out to customers. And then also for our energy and water efficiency programs.
Awesome. So today is lightning safety for severe weather preparedness week. We get lots of lightning here in Southwest Missouri, right? We get thunderstorms, we get lightning, we get tornadoes, all of that good stuff. How does lightning affect residents here in Greene County? Can it affect them?
So I can take that one. The interesting thing about lightning and outages is that the outages are just as random as the lightning is. So you can't really predict what the impact's going to be, and that's really because of the complexity of an electric system. So we have transmission and distribution and substations, and we have devices throughout our system that help to mitigate the impacts. But just for an example, a transmission line comes into a substation, from the substation is what we use to bring power to our customers. So if a lightning strike hits a transmission line, because of the configuration of our network, sometimes that doesn't result in outages at all. So our highest profile facilities taking a lightning strike doesn't actually impact customers at all. If a lightning strikes maybe a line that feeds a subdivision and there's fuses on that line, that can result in an outage, but it depends on where that strike happens and what other damage it causes. If it just blows fuses, for example, those customers may see an outage 30 minutes to an hour. But sometimes those lightning strikes will strike a pole and catch a pole on fire, or they'll catch a tree on fire. And if the damage becomes more extensive than, say, a breaker needing to operate or a fuse needing reset, and there's actually construction needed to respond to that, that's when you could be looking at extended duration outages. So it really is, like I said, the outages are really just as random as the strikes are. Where they happen, how frequent they happen, and what part of the electric system they hit will really determine whether it's a blink that people barely even notice, or an outage that takes 8 hours to replace equipment that caught fire.
Okay. And when you say a subdivision, what exactly is that in lay terms?
So you mean a subdivision, for example, so we'll have our distribution circuits come out of substations, and generally we'll have taps off of that line to feed a neighborhood or a subdivision, if you will. So it may be that an entire, I'll pick a random subdivision in town, that entire subdivision may be fed by a line that has fuses on that line. And what that is it's a segmentation technique that we use when we design our systems, because we wouldn't want a lightning strike on one piece of line to take entire sections of town out. So we have to isolate those areas, and that's what those fuses are for. They're really isolating devices. So you could have on one side, you could have a street where a subdivision is on each side of the street. And depending on where that strike hits, it may blow the fuses that only affect, say, the east side of the street, and the west side stays in power. So that's what we get that question a lot. And it really is, it boils down to how the electric system is configured as to why a person on one side of the street may have lights and the person on the other side doesn't. Sometimes we may have a lightning strike so we have a lot of subdivisions that the distribution is all overhead and backyards. So we may have a lightning strike that hits one specific pole, and the only effect it has is that it explodes a transformer on that pole. So it'll just be 3 to 4 customers in that case that are actually out of power because it's specific to that piece of equipment that took the lightning strike rather than the whole line that runs down the street. So yeah, like I said, it really just depends on where that strike hits that determines how long folks are out of power.
So what I'm hearing from you is that lightning strikes can cause power outages, and power outages can cause a lot of problems, especially for families at home. What do you recommend to the general public to help keep them safe if a power outage is to occur on their block, in their home, maybe after a storm that has lightning?
Yeah, so there's a lot of steps folks can take. And from the electric side, I'd have to say the first one, the one that we really want to get across more than anything else, is don't ever approach any down wires. Sometimes those strikes, they may just blow a fuse or they'll blow a piece of equipment on a pole, but sometimes they'll actually cause the wire to burn in two. And that may or may not be energized wires on the ground. So the first rule of safety from the electric side of utility is always going to be don't ever approach any down wires. Call 911 if you see any piece of wire laying on the ground from any of our poles or structures throughout the city. You know, there's other things that folks can do. It may not be as much safety as it is comfort to be prepared for extended outages. You know, it's a good idea to pay attention to weather and incoming weather and charge the devices and the electronics you'd want to have accessible from a communication standpoint. Think about the food and refrigeration needs. You know, do you have water and do you have some food available for a while? Because again, it's such a random effect that it can be anywhere from just your particular streets out to if we've had substations before that have taken lightning strikes and that causes several thousand people to be out of power at a time. So you know, the extent of the impact is hard to quantify, but definitely from a safety perspective, that key message is don't ever approach any down lines.
Okay. And what about your electronics in your home and your power goes out? Is there anything to help save your electronics or make sure that we're plugging them in or out safely?
Yeah, so ideally there are no electronics or no electrical devices plugged in during lightning events, but that's not really realistic. Having surge protection devices throughout your home is important. Most modern electronics have a lot of that built in. We have on our electric system, we have devices called lightning arresters, and every transformer's got one. So what that means is it's a device that's designed to intercept that lightning strike and prevent that voltage surge from entering homes. So that's effective a large part of the time, but the reality is there are still folks that have electrical damage from strikes, depending on where it happens, how intense it is, and what devices are in place. I think Kara may have had something, a follow-up comment to your last question, so I'm going to kind of let her run with that for a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think, Christine, if people, you know, again, back to just being weather aware, if they see some storms coming in, if they can go ahead and safely turn off those electronics and unplug them, that's always kind of that good measure to take. If you can't get to them though, just like what Warren said, surge protection devices are good. But those surges can enter a home in different ways other than just through the power lines. So they can come in through water lines in the house. Even if a tree is hit, you know, the roots can also be a form of a way that those surges can come into a house. So, you know, just taking those precautions ahead of time. I'd also like to say that one of the main things that we want customers to do is to make sure that they have the appropriate phone number tied to their account, because we want people to report these outages as soon as possible. And so having that number on their account identifies where they are and where their premise is. A lot of times people may have had an old phone number on there, and so we really encourage people to check that out. And then they can report the outages either online through the My Account system, or they can call us directly at 888-863-9001 and report that outage. And I think the thing, and Warren can talk more about this on how we restore that power, but typically we like to try to get as many customers back on at first. And then of course, you know, you do have some of those pockets out there.
Okay. And we do know that lightning can happen even when it's not as warm outside, and sometimes that power can go out and it's a little cold in your house. What are some tips and tricks to make sure that you stay warm if that power goes out?
So there's probably limited to an extent what can be done. Obviously, you know, blocking any areas where cold air may get in. Blankets are important. There's a lot of things folks can do to prepare for extended outages in cold weather, but those are probably the two of the things that come to mind most is have blankets to stay warm, block any areas where air is incoming, and then hold tight until we can get the power back on.
I think just being prepared, making sure you're dressed appropriately, having those extra blankets and pillows too, to wherever your storm shelter is important. And then, you know, just to make sure that you keep that refrigerated food and frozen food, you know, lasts as long as it can. Just minimize opening doors, and just being aware of that. And so minimizing not even just the opening of refrigerator and freezer doors, but just like what Warren was saying, you know, minimize going in and out of your home as much as possible.
Absolutely. And definitely listening to you guys, it reiterates the fact that we keep pushing that preparation equals safety, right? The more you can prepare for whatever's to come, disasters strike at any time, right? Thunderstorms can pop up, and we need to be prepared, and having that emergency preparedness kit with some of those blankets, the food, the water already set to go would be extremely resourceful in these type of situations.
So one of the other pieces of information I think it's important for our customers to be aware of is that we really make a deliberate effort to have outage information on our website. And so depending on what resources folks have and their abilities, you know, if you can look at our map and you can see what areas of town are dealing with outages, well, that also kind of tells you what areas of town aren't dealing with outages. And so perhaps you can find other ways to stay warm if you need to. We definitely, Kara mentioned earlier, when it comes to restoration, we prioritize, you know, certain loads within our system, and warming shelters are one of those as well. So, you know, depending on the scale of the outage and the restoration, we can't necessarily say that that's going to be the first thing we focus on, but those places are at the top of our list, just from a public safety aspect, to try to make sure we have power to those shelters when as reasonable as possible.
Absolutely. And what would you say to those individuals who may have healthcare needs and need that energy source, and then all of a sudden they lose it because of a power outage?
That's a great question, and we get that a lot. And the only response we really have to that is to be prepared. Take the steps you feel like you need to take to be prepared. So if that's backup batteries or that's having an additional system, we track the customers that have these, you know, these significant medical needs, these you know, these life support customers, if you will. And so that also factors into our prioritization for restoration. But there's no guarantee that we can make a timely response to that if we have a large scale outage event. So yeah, having steps in place to have extra batteries, having backups to prepare, that's really what this discussion really is all about. And I think the message we really want to drive home is to be prepared and understand that, you know, power can really go out at any time, especially during lightning events, and the extent of that outage really depends on where it happens on the system. So we can't really, other than be reactionary to that and let customers know, hey, here's what we're dealing with on our system, and here's areas we've got outages. We can't do a lot on the front end to predict that, just due to the random nature of lightning anyways.
Absolutely. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share or say that I didn't ask?
No, I would just like to reiterate, though, that it is important that people contact us and that we do have the correct phone number. And so that when they do call in to report that outage, we know exactly where they are.
I would just say appreciate the discussion today. This is great timing for it as we roll out of winter and see spring coming up. That's spring storms start rolling around, and we always every year anticipate being busy during this. So we ask our customers to be patient and be prepared. And like Kara said, make sure we have updated information, check our website for statuses, and try to, take some of that into their own hands.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And for everyone who is going to watch this and is watching it, we really appreciate you tuning in, getting some of this safety advice to help keep you and your family safe during this storm season that's coming up pretty quick. So you can also tune into any of the OEM social media channels as well. We usually update as well. But thank you so much to Kara and Warren. You guys were great, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Christina.